Good afternoon. It's my pleasure on behalf of the board and the citizens of this county to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone. And let's have our roll call, please. Everyone here? Yes. Very good. Now we will all stand and have our invocation and pledge, please.
Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the heat and we thank you for the rain. We thank you for the mercy and the grace that you've given us, the will to do for your people. Touch every heart, touch every soul and every body. Let us know that good things come from those who think good. All these things I pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
No, sir.
Motion to approve.
All in favor, raise your right hand. So ordered. All right. I believe, Mr. Rhodes, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We're bringing back for you tonight a public hearing on behalf of the Woodmore Farms subdivision. We've been through this topic a number of times, and I wanted to share with you a brief staff report to kind of give you the background as well as some new numbers as far as where we're at in meeting some of the statutory requirements and ensuring what the cost estimates are and giving you some ideas there of what the assessment may be if you proceed with this project. You may recall we started in earnest with this with the presentation of a preliminary assessment resolution back in March that was adopted. In that resolution, it mentioned a number of items, including what we thought may be the overall amount. You know, there was a lot of discussion about that. Staff believed we gave an appropriate amount. It was close to $681,000. And as you've seen, the final result here, if we go forward tonight with interest included, we were only about $6,000 off. So that's one thing we wanted to make you aware of. I know there was a lot of discussion about how high the price was originally. The bid came back to reflect it was very close to that. So as you know, we had to rebid the project since we didn't get the appropriate number of bids the first time. Therefore, we brought the preliminary assessment resolution back to you in May. Also, forgot to mention at the March meeting, we did amend the policy concerning the assessment procedures where the board could decide that they would have an option of charging any interest that was incurred if a bank loan was secured for this project. So tonight we have the public hearing for consideration of the final assessment resolution that's included in your package that details all the numbers of lots, all the information concerning the cost estimate, and a number of other items. So just to bring you up to date, this is as of what we received today with one cancellation. This map reflects the 51 lots that are involved and the 12 particular parcels that did not submit a petition for consideration. So this is the configuration. Again, those shown in light blue, this is an odd situation where we've got a portion of the subdivision streets that are actually already state maintained. It was a soil-based road, state maintained. When this development was first brought in for review, that portion was since paved. It stayed under state maintenance. So the black line on this particular map shows the area where the state maintenance is currently in place, and so those in light blue are not a party to this discussion at all. Those have sole road frontage on the existing state maintained road. The other ones in tan and also the hatched area are the ones included in the overall 51 that's subject to any assessment that may be incurred. So the numbers, 51 lots totals as of today. Signed petitions in hand, 39. There's your, remember we have to meet those magical thresholds of 75%, both with the number of petitions that have been signed overall, as well as the linear footage. We have met both of those, as you can see, the total road frontage, and we've got almost 77% of the linear footage there that accompanies the petitions that were signed. So just an idea of what we're looking at in this particular subdivision. Some areas of the roadway in not that bad a shape. Others are, but there is a lot of extensive roadside drainage work that's going to be required. And this particular area here is just one that was recently bush hogged when this picture was shown. But there is a serious drainage problem that has to be rectified to bring the water off this off these roadways. Another idea or another situation that will be hopefully improved with this process. A lot of the curbs already have, this is all soil and some rock in here that's basically been put into a pothole. So there are several areas where the pavement is failing at this point in time. On to the project cost. Again, just take through the full process. We only had one valid bid this second bidding process that came in at over $604,000. Remember, we had some alternates with this. This includes a T turnaround at one of the ends of one of the subdivision streets. In turn, after some negotiations our county engineer was involved with, the particular project contractor did reduce the cost, $542,000. And then with that, that's when our county finance director was involved. We looked at the interest, and he was able to secure that figure. You've got that in your package tonight, so you're looking at a grand total right now, best we can tell, with all the interest involved, along with the final bid, $687,000, $341.74. So down to the individual property owners, again, 51 properties involved. If you look at that over a 10-year period, that's the way the policy reads currently, you're looking at $13,477 per owner over that 10-year period. So that's the life of the entire project. Then per year, of course, $1,347,000. That does include the interest payment we talked about, or repayment of the interest. So tonight, after sharing that information and answering any questions you may have, it is recommended that the board consider approval or adoption of the final assessment resolution that's in your package tonight. And with that, Mr. Chairman, we're ready for a public hearing unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I declare the public hearing open. Do we have any people that signed up, Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir. We have a few signed up. We'll call your name, and if the attorney will read our statement on public hearings. Bobby Hopkins, if you'll come forward at the same time.
Yes, for purposes of this public hearing, I'll keep each speaker's time at 5 minutes per speaker for public hearings, and we welcome all comments for this hearing as it relates to Woodmore Farms subdivision.
Thank you. My name's Bobby Hopkins. I live at 2114 Trotters Way at Woodmore Farms. And we all know how we got here. I'm not sure how we got here, but we're here in this situation. And we're left as homeowners to resolve this issue that we have with our roads. So I'm not going to spend any time talking about that, but I would like to say that it's a great subdivision. We've lived there for a good number of years, raised our family. There's good people there. And we got to do something with these roads. I mean, it's got to be fixed. And unfortunately, it's up to us to fix it. And I'd like to thank James Rhodes and his team for all the effort they've put into it. And I'd like for y'all to really consider what we're faced with. We're not happy about what we've got to pay. I mean, this is almost double what I was anticipating paying based on the front section of the neighborhood. But there's a lot more drainage and ditch work, a lot more roads, and there's a lot more work. I'm thankful and I'm hopeful y'all will consider this. The one thing I will say, I am very disappointed, and I know the majority of our neighborhood is disappointed in the interest. This project was supposed to be interest-free for a 10-year period. And within 30 seconds, a month or so ago, it got passed that well, there's going to be interest, and they're going to borrow the money from the bank. I thought this was going to be funded through the county. But with that being said, this is where we're at, and we've got to fix our roads. And so the only thing I can say is please consider this. Again, it's a burden on us, and we've got 2 kids in college. But this has to be done, and there's nobody else to do it. So we have to take the matter in our hands, and we're doing it. And I hope y'all consider that when you make your decision tonight. And thank you for your participation, and thank you for helping us out. And thank you, James Rhodes, and your team for what you've done for us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Lynn Jackson.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, good evening. My name is Lynn Jackson, and I live at 1531 Trails End in the neighborhood of Woodmore Farms. I'm a Pitt County boy. I lived in Greenville and Pitt County all of my life, except for a few early years of my life. In fact, I was born in this building in 1962, but I don't recognize this as being the room. I speak to you tonight as the oldest neighbor, not the oldest, but I have lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone has lived in the Woodmore Farms portion of this development. My wife, Denise, and I started talking to Mr. Don Spate in 1992 as the development of this property was being made. Through our excitement of being a part of this neighborhood, Mr. Spate agreed to do a strip subdivision at the time and allow the first 5 lots of Wesley Lane to be approved and closed out so we could begin the process of building our home. Since that time, we have sold that home and built another home around the corner in the same neighborhood. I said that to say that, to Bobby's point, it's a very fine neighborhood that's very community-minded, very family-minded, a lot of young children, a lot of interaction with 4th of July parades and Christmas parties throughout the neighborhood. I've tried to talk my wife as I'm aging now into selling our house, but she is in the mindset of we want to have our grandchildren in this home, and I'm in favor of that as well. The greatest investment that we've made in life is in our home in Woodmore Farms and in Pitt County. And I certainly want to do whatever we have to do in terms of maintaining our roads to secure and maintain the property value of our homes. I want to thank you tonight because we have truly been at the mercy of you and this group for guidance, support, direction in this entire process. I could talk about the money aspect of it, but in simple math, big jobs requiring a lot of work equals a lot of money. And none of our members of our neighborhood, let me speak to myself, I am not in a position to fund my portion of the repairs of what our neighborhood is in need of out of my own personal pocketbook. So to you, I thank you for even your consideration of making a way for us to have our improvements made to our homes and our roads in our neighborhood so that we can be proud neighbors. People can be proud to ride through our neighborhoods and our property maintain its current value. So I would just ask you tonight as you consider that, just vote in favor of trying to help us out because we're in need of your help. And thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Okay, next we have Riley Roberts.
My name is Riley Roberts. I live at 1660 Trails End. I'm at the opposite end of the spectrum from Lynn. My wife and I moved to the neighborhood just a little over a year ago, but we immediately fell in love with it. We like all of our neighbors and how outgoing everybody is. We enjoyed the Christmas party this year. We have 2 young children, and we love that the roads are quiet. There's not a lot of through traffic, so they can ride their bikes and scooters, and we can take family walks without worrying about a lot of other cars or anything like that. And so I think, like a lot of my neighbors, we take pride in our neighborhood and our homes, and we want to keep things looking nice. I know you'll find me most weekends out in the yard or around the house trying to keep my property looking nice, and I think a lot of my neighbors do the same thing just to keep up the beauty of the neighborhood. So even though I know when we moved in, the roads were in a sorry condition, but we saw what was going on with the Woodmore Drive at the other end of the neighborhood. We were told that, hey, this repair work should be coming to the rest of the neighborhood at some point, and we knew we would be on the hook for the cost of it. With the estimates that have come in, the bid, the cost is a lot higher than I think what any of us expected it to be, but I think in the long run, it's worth the investment, looking at property values and just that sense of pride in the neighborhood, wanting to keep it looking nice. So I asked the board if there's any way we could move forward with the proposal. That'd be
Thanks,
great.
sir.
Thank you.
Shane Golden.
My name is Shane Golden, and I'm at 2033 Mayor's Way. And I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. Like Riley, I'm fairly new to the subdivision. My wife and I and my 3 kids have been there just almost 2 years. And we love the neighborhood. We knew some people in the neighborhood before we moved in, and they had told us how welcoming the neighborhood is, how much of a family unit the neighborhood is, and all of that and more has been very true. We've pretty much met all of our neighbors, more than even the 51 there, over the course of just 2 years, and have get-togethers, and it's a great place to live. And haven't been in the fight as long as some of them have, as far as all the background and everything that's gone on. But you know, my wife and I obviously moved in this home to be there for a while, and to raise our family, and then, you know, beyond that possibly. So, you know, it is as Riley said, a much higher cost than we had anticipated. But for us we love our neighborhood, and we want it to be looked at in a great respect, and want to enjoy being there, and again, maintain the property values of our homes. So I just wanted to speak and thank you for the opportunity, and would hope that you would see this through. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next.
Bill Hofflex.
I am Bill Hoffler. I live at 1697 Trails End. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come before you tonight and talk about our neighborhood and the direction we need to go as we go forward. I have a couple of questions, to be honest with you, other than recounting some of the same points that have been covered by some of my neighbors that came ahead of me. The Woodmore Farms and Woodmore projects were at one point split into 2 different projects. Initially, we started out as a collective group with Woodmore and Woodmore Farms. There was a determination made at some point to split those into 2 separate projects, with the Woodmore portion going through first. There was a pot of money that was outlaid, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, about $200,000 initially, to put forth an interest-free methodology for repairing the roads in Woodmore. That $200,000 pot of money is now in assessment and is currently being replenished by those homeowners in Woodmore. My question to the Board of Commissioners is, since that $200,000 of money is currently outlaid and is being replenished well ahead of our assessment taking place, can that $200,000 be applied to this project? Because in 10 years, that $200,000 pot will have been replenished. So my question is, how can we, if it's creatively done, or what methods have we looked at using that $200,000 for the next project along? We have, in the county, multiple subdivisions and neighborhoods that are going to be going through the same process that Woodmore and Woodmore Farms are going through. And I don't remember off the top of my head, Mr. Rhodes will know better than I, how many additional subdivisions might exist that are in the same bond that we are and will be in the same bond. Do you remember right off the top?
I know the approximate amount of mileage,
Okay.
not the number of subdivisions.
So we're not the last neighborhood with this particular issues. There are going to be others. As we go back and look at the history of this project, there's not a homeowner in Woodmore Farms that had a hand in creating where we are today, but we do have the bill in hand to pay for it. So what I'm asking the commissioners to do and the county manager is, what creative ways can we look at and target $200,000 that's already been set aside for road repair for county subdivisions? And how can we creatively use that money going forward to offset some of the costs that the homeowners in Woodmore Farms are currently facing? And as I talk with many of my neighbors, those for the project, those that have apprehension for the project, it's the debt assessment that is probably the biggest sticking point. Because we started down this process with a tax-free possibility of funding the project. That's now gone to an interest payment, 100%, which is on our backs. Now, obviously, we're going to do what we need to do to fix our roads. What we're asking the county to do is, let's look at that pot of money that already exists, and are there ways that we can creatively use that to offset some of our costs? Okay, thank you for your time.
Scott, would you hold
Sure.
on a minute, just a minute?
Sure.
Scott, how about responding? Come back up, please.
So the Board of County Commissioners did appropriate $220,000 back in fiscal year 14-15, and that was prior to that, a couple of years prior to that, we had spent probably a couple of years developing the assessment proposal, how we were going to handle road paving assessment projects. When the board actually put that money aside, we then had no petitions that were coming in, none were valid, none of them had the 75% threshold signed. It wasn't until Woodmore, the first Woodmore came in, and that was then, so that was 14-15, the following fiscal year, 15-16, there was no action, and we had that money set aside. There was some question, why didn't we set aside another 220? We were in, I won't say dire financial constraints, but we were under budgetary constraints. We figured there was nothing going on, so we held the 220 for the first project. You guys, the first Woodmore came in fiscal year 16-17. We did the process you're doing here tonight, the preliminary assessment resolution, the final assessment resolution, and then the final assessment resolution, which is done this year. We have not collected any of the assessment money on that. That won't begin until the tax bills go out in July of this year for the fiscal year 19-20 year. So that's kind of the history on where we're at.
Right. And may I?
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Of the 200,000, I think the Woodmore 1, I'm calling it the first Woodmore
Sure.
project, was about 164. Pardon me?
106.
Okay, I've got my numbers back. $106,000. So technically, there is a balance in that set aside, correct, James?
We did not use all the set aside.
Right.
Right. So there's money, if I understand correctly, in that initial fund that we would certainly like to bring to bear. This project, if the commissioners go forth and pass this final resolution, we're still next spring at the very earliest, which is past the next tax assessment season, that fund is going to be replenished before our project actually gets started.
It'll take 10 years.
Time frame wise.
10 years to pay that fund back, because it's a
Correct.
10-year
But
assessment.
we're being assessed. I understand. I'm just looking for creative ways to take that $200,000 of money that in 10 years will be totally replenished and apply it to our project as we're looking at approximately $150,000 in interest payment, and there's a fund potentially that exists there of $200,000. Okay.
Thank you, sir. That's probably not what you wanted to hear, but that's the aspects of it. And of course, this tonight is for this particular assessment as we're trying to get in this section here. Next one.
Any other speakers for the public
Yes,
hearing?
that's what I meant.
Okay, that's all we had on the list, unless there's somebody else in the
Excellent.
audience who wanted to come forward and speak.
All right. Does anyone else want to speak on this issue at this time? If not, I will declare the public hearing closed. Now watch the pleasure of the board as to this adoption of the final assessment resolution, which
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Rhodes presented to us.
I have a question about the interest. James, if somebody is fortunate enough to be able to fork out, I'm going to do some rough math here, $10,500, can they avoid the interest over the 10 years?
I am not your financial expert, so I'm going to defer
Well,
on
the
that
thing is-
question.
I mean, the thing is that.
In theory, it sounds right, but I would defer to our manager and finance manager on that.
Is that something that can be answered now, or is that something that needs to be answered later?
Well, currently, there's nothing within the policy that would cover a direct payment. So we'd have to address that
There's
from the
nothing
policy
that
standpoint.
prohibits it. You can
Yeah,
pay it
or
off
prohibits it.
upfront.
Yeah, and so somebody paying it off, if they don't owe $13,477. If they're fortunate enough right now, based on $542,000 divided by 51, that's about $10,500. If they could cut a check for $10,500, can they avoid that $2,800, $2,900, $3,000 in interest?
I would think so, because if we go to the bank and borrow the total amount, and then say half the property owners theoretically step up and say, we just want to pay it up front, here's a check, we can then make advance payment on that loan and not have to pay the interest on the duration of the time
And will
period.
they be credited that amount of money?
They will forego, they would not be charged the interest, they would just pay the principal amount, not the
So let
interest.
it be said, so let it be written, right?
And
Ten Commandments.
Brian, do you agree with that?
So if when
Yes.
we borrow the money, we need to include an early payoff in there.
Yes, and I think normally we have those provisions.
Mr. Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we have $100,000 round number, I think it might be a little more left in the fund. And if we wanted to, then we could, through fund balance, I don't know what it would bring us to, use the 442, and then you have the front end paying it back and the back end paying it back, and then in 10 years, we've recouped all of our money, then they could do it at the interest free. And then I would also just suggest that we probably just get rid of this policy altogether, because it's something we've tried to do that as a good thing, but it has really been tough, not just for us, but for the residents as well. There's been a lot of heartache over it, and we're really operating on the outer edge of our authority as a county. We're the first county in the state to do it. I know there's another county looking at it, Godspeed to them. But, and the other thing I concern myself with is the state catching wind of it and go, that's an outstanding idea for us to save $1 billion. Counties now have responsibility for paving neighborhoods, and we're going to get out of that business and only focus on travel roads. And so I don't know what that would do to the fund balance on percentage, because we do have a policy of not going below a certain amount. But I'd just be interested to see what that would bring us to percentage-wise, and then as it gets replenished, then the total amount.
Can you state that proposal again on terms
Sure.
of fund balance?
Well, the fund balance appropriation would be 442, 498 roughly, because we already have 100,000 left over from the original pot. And that group is starting to repay that now, correct?
Correct. Beginning July 1.
So basically, we would use that plus the 442, 498 to get to the total amount, which on interest would save the taxpayers about $3,000, cuts them to about $1,064 a year, about $89 a month, if they can only afford to pay it back monthly. And I think if we could cut out the interest payment, that cuts out a lot of heartburn for them. And then we can just cut out the policy from this point forward and cut out the heartburn for us.
I think that if you take the 100,000, you don't want to apply it against the 542. If anything, you might want to apply it against the 144 in total interest, because then it would be unfair that the folks in Woodmore 1 are paying 100% of project costs. These folks would be paying, not only not paying interest, they'd be paying less than the principal.
So total project cost is $542,497.
Correct.
We already have $100,000. Then we would take the remaining balance from fund balance to pay for the project, not use a bank at all. And then as Woodmore 1 and now Woodmore 2 pays us back, it goes directly back to the fund balance to replenish the fund. And then we've avoided interest, we've avoided dealing with banks, we've dealt directly with DOT ourselves and dealt with the problem directly ourselves and avoided the interest costs.
In terms of fund balance, we do project by June 30th of this year, as we end this fiscal year, we will be within the board's policy of 18 to 20%, maybe just right above 20%. Do you want to remind the board our comparable counties, Brian, is it have 25% versus all counties have 32% fund balance?
We changed how we looked at counties during the budget workshops. I think it was around 26 or 27% was our new model for our comparable counties.
And then all counties?
32, 33.
Okay.
Yeah, that's them, and our policy is 18 to 20. So unless we're going to change it to 26, then I think we're healthy financially anyway.
Ms. Ward, had you finished, Glenn?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Ward?
I think that somehow if we could work something with this, what is it, 114, that is in excess now that was not used on the previous project, that would be something. But the history of this, we were trying to be very creative. And just as they've told you, we're kind of teetering on, and I'm sitting here to tell you I have no clue what the state's going to do about anything tomorrow when you pass a budget and have no budget workshop. So we don't know when they're going to look at us and say, oh, y'all do the roads in the county. So, and that may mean highways too, who knows. But when we started this project, it was meant to be very helpful, because the history is that once the project is turned over to the homeowners, so to speak, they don't have to, the builders do not have to take care of the roads or do anything until the roads, and the state doesn't take them over until, and everybody on the board knows this, but I'm not sure the public understands the way this works. So the homeowners are left with these bad roads that a lot of times are caused, the cracks and the dips and the chunks taken out by the trucks that came in there to build the houses in the first place and continue to build them. So then they leave and you've got those bad roads, and that's hard. It's very difficult. So we were trying to be very creative and help our citizens, and I would not be in favor of going into our fund balance, regardless of what maybe we should raise it to 25, but I've been here when we got that fund balance really low, and when the school comes to us and everybody comes to us and we don't have that in there, we can't borrow money to build schools, which we have to do at PCC and in the county. So the fund balance is very important, and the amount that's in there is very important. But I would be totally in favor of using this $114,000 to knock some of that off of your interest. And that's what I would like to propose when we get ready to make a motion to move on this.
Mr. Garris.
Scott, number one, the $114,000, where is that?
The $114,000 was in the general fund balance. We moved it to, by resolution,
So it's not in the fund balance now?
No, it's in a road paving project fund.
Okay. The whole, one of the foundational premises of this policy when we developed it was not going to cost the county any money, because, as it's already been stated, the state wants us to start spending money on roads so they can say, okay, you can do roads, and we cannot afford that locally. So the whole objective was for this not to cost the county any money. Now, the policy originally said we were going to fund these projects when funds were available. And that's what we did on the first project. The second project, the funds are not available. If we want to maintain our goal in our fund balance of 18 to 20%, and I am 100% supportive of that, because again, that if we lower that fund balance, it can impact our bond rating, which will impact our borrowing capacity. So I think that we need to approve the project. I'm in favor of approving it, but I really don't like, number one, the cost of the project, and I don't like, number two, the fact that you're going to have to pay the interest. But for the county to remain neutral financially on this, then that means that the owners of the homes will have to pay the interest. And I think that is what we have to do. Again, for us to look at borrowing the money as a county is really outside of the original procedure that we developed. But we were trying to do this to help the community. And again, if we borrow money, everybody knows if you borrow money, there's interest involved. So I'm supportive of the proposal, and I appreciate every one of you coming up here, and I appreciate your comments. You were very reasonable in your comments. But again, I am supportive of the procedure as we originally expressed it, and that was that this would not cost the county any money. So, Mr. Chairman?
I got one more, and then we'll be ready, Jimmy.
Okay.
All right, Tom.
I'd like to correct something that was said a little while ago. The reason that we're in this mess, because the builders of the subdivisions have shirked their responsibilities, period. If it's a Don Spate originally started this, my personal opinion is his heirs really should be responsible to go back, make the original agreement when people moved in there, that when they got so much built, I forget what it is, 75, 80% of the subdivision, it's the builder's responsibility to go to the North Carolina Department of Transportation and submit a petition to have that road adopted. The problem is they haven't done it. Some places have gone out of business or whatever, but the bottom line is they have shirked their responsibility. Second item, I was involved in this because I was part of that original group that got together and we tried to come up with something. But I would like to ask Jana, if you would go back into the records in 2014 and find out what the original statements were. It's my recollection that we said we were going to put $200,000 per year aside for this project, for these projects, because we recognized that it was not just one project. It was dozens of subdivisions around the county that could potentially fall into this. And even if we put $200,000 aside per year, we would never be able to do everything it's supposed to do. But the bottom line here is let's not be mistaken. The legislature let us down. We came together as a group. We had builders involved. There was agreements made. There was things that was supposed to go into play to actually have a builder when they build a subdivision to put up a certain amount of money as a promissory guarantee that they will then get to the DOT and have the roads adopted sooner rather than later. And our legislature gutted that.
Commissioner Colson, we actually pulled the minutes today back from this was the meeting on June 15th of 2015. The board passed a resolution to establish committing to the fund balance to the 220. It was just for that 1 year. We then reported the next year there were no petitions moving forward that met the threshold. We also reported the budget workshops. We told the board that if there was no petitions that were meeting the threshold, should we put another $200,000 in the fund, or should we use that to meet other demands and needs for services? At that point in time, the board said, let's just hold on to the initial 220, see what comes about, and then move forward from there. So we've pulled all the minutes going back, even going forward as well.
Okay, well, regardless, I mean, what I said is not really incorrect because that was part of our discussion. I remember that very clearly, that we were going to do that. But in any case.
Thanks, Tom. I have an observation. We've got about 76% of the people in this subdivision who, with all this agreement, took upon themselves to get, as Jimmy was alluding to get together to try to resolve an issue in their community and agreed to ante up some money to do that. I don't think we need to let them down and not go through with this agreement that we've been laboring for many months now with, and we ought to respond. Most of the people that came here said they wanted it passed. So now, Mr. Garris, did you want to make a motion?
Yes,
or what's your
I make a motion that we approve this proposal, and to be specific, that we only have the one bid, so we have to go with the bid, and we also have to add the interest because we're going to have to borrow the money to the tune of $687,341,000, right, James?
Yes, sir.
So I move that we move forward and approve this.
I second it.
All right. Now, any further discussion?
Is that with the proposal, Jimmy, is that with that if somebody can pay it earlier, they have the early payoff?
Well, we've got to make sure that the bank that we borrow the money from will allow early payoff. And to me, that should be very simple. Because I think your point is well taken. If somebody has the money, they can avoid that $2,000-3,000 in interest.
Well, I will add, we were talking about combining this with the next lobs with the school system, which would be $6 million, which is what we have left through the quarter-cent sales tax revenues for them, and then possibly the law enforcement center. That, Brian, would that have early payoff provisions with the lobs?
It shouldn't affect it.
Okay.
Glenn, did you have something?
Yeah, so on the early payoff, I mean, really starting to get into the weeds on things, because if I can afford to go ahead and pay it up front, then I pay it up front, but then we don't know what's going to happen with everybody else. And so the total may not change that much. If only one person, let's say, pays the $10,000. So then the total doesn't really change as far as interest accrued, maybe by a little bit. Well, let's just say the $3,000. That still leaves everybody else taking care of the rest of the interest.
But it saved that person $3,000.
Well, yeah, it saved them $3,000, but I mean, it's their money we're using anyway.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, can I
No.
make one?
Well, I support the project, but I don't support this motion.
I just want to say that if the board passes the final assessment resolution, and correct me, Madam Attorney, then the project is a go. If somebody comes forward who's part of the 75% and says, nah, tomorrow I don't want to do this, it's sealed, it's a done deal, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now,
Call for question.
we've got a motion. All in favor of the motion that Mr. Garris made and seconded, raise your right hand. All right, got that? All opposed? Thank you.
And
Thank
Mr.
each of
Chairman,
you for coming, and appreciate you. Go
we will
ahead.
be bringing back the contract for your consideration at the next meeting too, with the paving contractor. Thank you.
All right, next, Mr. Manager.
Okay, next we have the conditional use permit request for the Pastor Charles E. Lewis Daycare Center, and Eric Gooby is going to handle that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have one conditional use permit request tonight. As we stated before, these types of hearings.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. These types of hearings do require quasi-judicial procedures. Those procedures include the hearing is to establish the facts of the case, not to gather any opinions. Any witnesses or anybody that want to speak must be under oath, and testimony must be supported by evidence. Also, the board has to maintain a detailed record of the hearing. There's no ex parte communication allowed, and written findings of fact are required. Any reasons for disapproval have to be provided in writing, and decisions are appealed to Superior Court. So with that, Mr. Chair, we'd like to ask for any witnesses to come up to be sworn in.
All right. I guess I'm declared the public hearing open at this point. If you don't have any witnesses to be sworn.
Well, we still have our presentation to provide, but this would just be swearing in.
There's nobody signed up to speak, but if there's anybody, I guess, what staff do
That
you have
wanted
to
to
be?
speak. Yes, staff also has to be sworn in as well.
Unless there's somebody in the audience who wants to.
Anybody want to speak on this issue? If not, then ready for declare the public hearing open?
It's going to pass without anybody saying He doesn't have to speak, he doesn't want to.
I know, but tell you can't tell people.
Okay.
You don't have to speak on it.
So, Mr. Chair, the request tonight is from Pastor Charles Lewis, and that was the gentleman who was just sworn in a second ago. It's for a conditional use permit to allow for the expansion of an existing child daycare center located at 2659 Railroad Street, and that's in Belle Arthur. That's also the location of Antioch Church Ministries. The comprehensive land use plan does designate this parcel as a commercial crossroad community. Just to give the board a definition of a child daycare center, that's a center where at any one time there are 3 or more preschool-age children or 9 or more school-age children receiving child care. According to the applicant, there won't be any increase in the number of children being served. This is purely just an expansion to the space itself. They are also proposing to increase the hours of operation from 6 a.m. to 11 o'clock p.m. This is the zoning of the property. You see it's primarily rural residential. There's some existing general commercial in the area, including the Belle Arthur Water Corporation property. You see it is also within the commercial crossroad community. And the existing land use, there is the existing institutional use where the church and the daycare is, with a good amount of residential property around it. This is the existing daycare building itself, as well as the existing church. And then the site plan for the property, I'll get into a few little details here. The boundary of the property you see highlighted in red. There are several existing buildings, including several small storage buildings. The existing daycare you see towards the western side, as well as the church and a life center. Back behind the daycare, there's also a couple of modular classroom buildings that are there. The proposed building you see highlighted in red there. Just some quick notes on the location of the building. Environmental Health is one of our reviewers when they review these, when we get these site plans in. And they noted that there are 2 existing septic systems on the property. The one for the sanctuary is located behind where the proposed building is going to be, and the one for the daycare is located in front. Well, where the building is shown on this site plan does not quite match up what's on the environmental health permit, so that building will have to move forward approximately about 15 to 20 feet on the site plan. So we'll be requesting a revised site plan on this. The zoning ordinance does have standards for child daycare centers that include security fencing, location, and hours of operation. Also, there are several criteria that the board has to find when making a decision. Will the use materially endanger the public health or safety? We as staff feel like since it's an expansion to an existing daycare, that it will not materially endanger public health. We also find it will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property owners. Will not be in harmony with the area. We find it will be in harmony with the area in which it's to be located, and is also in conformance with our land use plan and other plans adopted by the county. So we do have 2 recommended motions tonight. The first is to acknowledge that the conditional use permit application is complete and complies with all the applicable requirements of the zoning ordinance. And the second motion is to approve the conditional use permit subject to the zoning ordinance requirements, as well as the following additional conditions: that the proposed use will operate only between the hours of 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., and that they will provide a revised plan showing that location of the building in compliance with the environmental health setbacks. So again, that we would have to move forward on that plan. So with it, Mr. Chair, now we're ready for the public hearing.
Thank you. Having said that, I declare the public hearing open. Do we have anyone signed up for that?
No, sir.
Anyone present that would like to speak to this at this public hearing? If not, I declare the public hearing closed. On page 31 of your today's agenda, those 2 motions he alluded to.
Motion to approve them both.
All right, I second.
All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. All opposed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, got a presentation, Mr. Manager.
Yes, next is the public hearing on the proposed Pitt County drone ordinance.
Yes, that's right. I'm trying to skip Charles again. All right.
And
yes, we are.
The county attorney is going to cover that, I believe.
Yes, you have in your package a revised drone ordinance that meets the criteria as required by the FAA. If the board wishes to consider adoption, it must hold a public hearing this evening and then make a motion thereafter.
Can't we just go ahead on
With
the
that,
vote?
you would need to open your public
All
hearing.
right,
your comments.
I declare the public hearing open. Anyone signed up to speak to that?
Yes, sir, we have three people.
All right, let's call them up.
Howie Franklin, the attorney, again, will read our public hearing.
One at a time, we will be
Verbiage.
ready.
Yes, for purposes of this public hearing, I'll keep time for each speaker at 5 minutes per speaker. When you come up, please state your name and address. Keep all of your, share your comments, and we welcome all comments on matters related to the drone ordinance.
You going to call them out again, Mr. Manager?
Yes, Howie Franklin.
Thank you, sir.
Howie Franklin. I preside at 39 Augusta Drive, Oak Island, North Carolina. I am the airport med director at Cape Fear Regional Jetport, and which is one of the busiest GA airports in the state because we have 60 miles of beach and 39 golf courses in good weather. But we also, this drone situation, the state is very much aware of it. The FAA is very much aware of it. Whatever minimal problem it is now, it's proposed to be a greater problem, and constantly growing and growing the number of sales, and the type of technology is improving extensively. My recommendation from an aviator is to be very proactive in this situation. We don't, rules and regulations, as far as I'm concerned, are made for people. And if they interfere with people, they should change the rules and regulations or make rules and regulations. This is rules and regulations to defend people. And I think it's very wise for somebody, or for the board, to consider that situation. Be very proactive. It's going to come across the whole state and whole country. It's heading down the tubes rapid fire, so be prepared whatever. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Next.
Bill Hall.
My name is Bill Hall. I live at 1643 Tull Road here in Greenville, and I am a drone pilot, and all of us are not going down the tube, as the man says. I use my drone for search and rescue for pets. People lose pets within 2 to 3 hours. They call me. Within that 2 to 3 hours, I can be on site, and a lot of times we can find the pet wandering around a field, streets, or whatever. I do not have a single problem with any of the regulations that you're putting out. Most of them are already covered by the FAA anyway. I am a certified single-engine pilot. I have not passed my Part 107, so I'm not certified yet to fly my drone other than recreational. When I do my search and rescue, obviously FAA says I have to be line of sight. I cannot have nothing between me and my drone, although I do drive my drone with an iPad, because I can't see it more than 500 feet away anyway. So with that being said, I have to move around quite a bit, neighborhoods and stuff, to try to see it. So what I'd like to see is a clarification on the rule you have about private property. Every piece of property that I know of is owned by somebody. So is every piece of property private? Is sidewalks private? Streets private? Anywhere that a public person can go in the public, is that considered private property? I need a clarification on what private property is, to where I can take my drone off to go do what I do and still be legal. So that's all I'm looking for. Now, second part to that, I am working on getting my Part 107. Once I do receive my Part 107, according to your ordinance back here, under the certification authorization, would I be exempt? Could I then take off from private property without permission of the landowner? So that's my two questions, or my two.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Clarifications.
That's your presentation?
Sir.
You have anything else you want to say?
No, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Who's next?
John Pierce.
Yeah, I brought one of those scary drones in with me too. I know they sound like they're the worst thing in the world when you watch television these days, but I guess I take a different approach, and I understand the safety for the airports and stuff, and I'm 100% agreeing with that. I mean, the FAA is setting guidelines out, and those guidelines need to be maintained and enforced. But at the same time, there is a recreational use for this sport, and it is growing like wildfire. This is one of the most interesting hobbies that anybody could currently get into. And Pitt County should not hold anybody back from recreational use for something like this. Drone racing is a huge thing, and I think that BMX is like a dead sport for this county. Couldn't we have like drone racing in our parks? I mean, I'd like to see that incorporated into the Parks and Recreation even, but also maintaining the guidelines set forth by the FAA. Let the FAA be the guiding organization over this. I wouldn't want to see the county implement laws that exceeded that of the federal government, who would be far more educated in aviation than any of us. I think that we should support this wonderful thing that has come about, and it is going to be part of the future. The Global Transpark's even talking about implementing drones into it. I mean, this is something that children today can really benefit from in the years to come, and we need to actually embrace it and enforce it also. But I think that we shouldn't go above and beyond what the FAA is setting forth currently, and that's all I ask. I just ask that you actually support the recreational use and legal use of these toy helicopters, basically. That's really what they are. And they do come in different sizes and stuff, but this is a racing one, and it's $250, and it is one of the most fun things I've ever done. It really is, and that's all I had to say, y'all.
Thank you for your presentation. Anyone else sign up?
That's all we have, unless there's anybody else in the audience.
No one else decides to speak to this issue. I declare the public hearing open. What's the pleasure of the board?
Closed. I move that we accept this adoption, the adoption of this.
I second it.
Any discussion? Mr. Williams?
Mr. Chairman, just want to address something that the gentleman said. I don't think the way this is written, it would affect recreation. There doesn't appear to be anything in there that would stop you from being able to use it recreationally in a public space or on your own property in any way. It's mainly, it appears to be, as long as you got consent of the property owner, you don't have a weapon hooked to it, you're not 500 feet from an emergency vehicle, 500 feet from an active law enforcement or emergency response, over the jail, or 100 feet of a school without proper authorization from the school, you're good to go.
Right.
So,
I think those are great guidelines. Now, what about theoretically, you could be 500 feet from something and not be aware of something going on? I mean, if there was a physical barrier or something between you and maybe I'm just trying to picture it.
I think that would just come down to the discretion of the enforcement of it. It's not, I don't think it's a zero tolerance absolutist policy. That understanding a lighter drone could get blown, they're subject to wind. I don't know how much that weighs, but if it's not over 0.55 pounds, you're good no matter what.
Mr. Chairman, in response to the other gentleman's question, if you are certified under Part 107, this ordinance is not applicable to you.
Okay.
Okay, very good. We've got a motion made and second.
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by raising your right hand. All opposed, like. So ordered. Okay?
And since that is unanimous, it will not need to come back. It is passed effective today.
All right, Mr. Manager, I believe we've got two scholars from Elps High School that I would request go down and help give this presentation.
Yes,
Ann and Melvin.
Yes, I believe Jimmy Jones is coming forward.
The person's not here.
Oh.
He's not here.
Well, let Melvin present it and Ann receive it, then one or the other.
That's good.
I'm for that, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Ready? Go ahead. Please. Melvin, Ann, thank you. No.
Mr. Chairman, if the board will take action to adopt the proclamation.
All right.
Motion to
Do we have a motion?
approve. Second.
All right. Let's all vote for the motion. Raise your right hand. Thank you. All opposed? Motion passed.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to read the proclamation?
Please. Yes, sir.
We have a proclamation prepared to read and present. Get a picture here first. Okay. Office of the Pitt County Board of Commissioners, proclamation recognizing the CMEPS High School Alumni Association Week. Whereas the Greenville Industrial CMEPS High School alumni will be celebrating their 39th anniversary from July 6th through 8th in 2018 in honors of Charles Montgomery, otherwise known as CMEPS, And whereas CMF's high school has been known by numerous names, including Greenville Industrial High School, Greenville Graded School, Fifth Street or Fleming Street School. And whereas the Charles Montgomery CMFs began his educational career in 1903 and served many years as principal in the Greenville City Schools. As an educator and principal, CMFs was very instrumental in assuring that quality education was afforded to everyone. And whereas in 1932, CMFs was appointed by the Governor O. Max Gardner to serve on North Carolina's Interracial Relations Committee, which held its statewide convention in Greenville that year. And whereas because of his dedication to education and his community, CMF's High School, CMF's Middle School, and CMF's Recreation Center were named in his honor. Whereas the CMF's Alumni Association has an active roster of members that are service-driven and focused on the betterment of our community. And whereas the CMF's Alumni Association played an instrumental role in the West 5th Street design and implementation, as well as the renovation of the Epps Recreational Center. Now, therefore, it be proclaimed by the Pitt County Board of Commissioners that we do hereby recognize the 39th Annual CMF's High School Alumni Celebration on July 6th through 8th, 2018, adopted this 18th day of June 2018, signed by our Chairman, Mark W. Owens, Jr., and tested by Deputy Clerk Janet T. Singleton. Commissioner McLaughlin and Commissioner Huggins, I present this to you. Both of you, one of you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Greenville CMF High School Association, Alumni Association, I accept it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Go anywhere?
All right, do we have any signed up for public address, Mr. Manager?
We had one name that was repeated, Howie Franklin, but I believe he spoke on the general ordinance.
All right, well, we'll let him go. Okay. All right, first order of business under the item from Report Southwest. He likes to talk to.
Is it built yet?
It is not. It's getting there. We'll get in there quickly. This is just an update where we are currently in our progress for developing the Southwest Bypass Corridor Land Use Plan. Just as a reminder, this is a cooperative effort between Pitt County. We're serving as the lead agency on this, as long as with the City of Greenville, the towns of Winterville, Ayden, the Greenville Urban Area MPO, and NCDOT. We did hold a community workshop on April 9th. We were pretty pleased with the turnout with that. We had approximately 60 people that attended that workshop. They were able to provide a lot of information on future growth and development in the area, and also received a lot of information that we have prepared and provided to them. So we certainly thank everybody who was able to attend that workshop. It's just some shots of the workshop itself and some of the information they were able to get. This is some of the information that we provided to them. We were able to develop some land use modeling scenarios based off some of our current policies, some of our current ordinances, and then they were able to look at these and provide input on them and sort of tell us what parts of it they liked, what they didn't like, and so based off that, we've started working on our plan recommendations and also our future land use map. And we also had an online survey that was run from February to around the end of April. Had approximately 340 responses to that, so we felt like that was a very good response rate. Our steering committee has met 3 times since the last time I presented in March. They met in March, May, and June, just last week. They've been working on developing those land use scenarios that I mentioned. They've also reviewed all the comments and input from those workshops and used those to start drafting those plan recommendations. We've also developed a draft future land use map. This is, again, based off that information we received at the community workshop. So that public information, that public input has been very, very invaluable to us. What it is we established several character areas to determine how we want some of these areas to develop and how we want that growth to occur. And based off this land use map, what you see is sort of from what we heard a lot of from the public is that they're very interested in preserving that agricultural and that rural feel to the area. So what you see on the western side of the corridor or on the western side of the highway is maintaining that agricultural land use character to make sure that we keep open spaces and farmland preservation as a priority. Then you see a lot of development proposed for the north and south ends of the corridor where we already see a lot of development. There's a lot of opportunity for future development, particularly industrial development. And then also to the east side of that corridor, you see a lot more sort of higher intensity or higher density development, and that's based off the sewer and the utilities that are available there that can serve those types of development. We also started working on the frameworks for some of these plan recommendations. We looked at our land use policy. Where do we want things to go? How do we want them to grow? Then also infrastructure. What type of utilities are we going to have to serve them? Do we have the utilities to serve them? Those utility providers, do they have agreements between each other to know which of them is going to be able to expand and serve these areas? We also see that the interchanges are going to be more gateways into some of these municipal areas, and we want to make sure that they're aesthetically pleasing. That was another thing that we heard a lot from public input. The transportation component, we're going to look at not only just the highway. The highway is designed to improve some of that traffic, but it's also going to have effect on some of those other roads and those corridors that feed into it. So how is that going to continue to grow? Then also improvements for recreation and open space. And then one of the things we heard a lot about too was lighting. In particular, one of the components of maintaining that agricultural or rural feel is to have a dark sky. And also we have a Time for Science down in the southern end of the county that they have a vested interest in maintaining a dark sky for some of their programs, and we don't want any development that occurs based off this to affect their programs. So our next steps, the one thing that we're excited about is we're going to have a second public meeting on June 25th. That's a week from tonight. It's going to be from 4 to 7 o'clock p.m. It's going to be at the Go Ahead Student Center at PCC. It's the same location we had our first public meeting at. We'll have 2 presentations. At the first meeting, we had a lot of folks that showed up early at 4 o'clock, and some folks that kind of came in later. We want to make sure if those folks come early again, they can get that presentation. But if you can't come that early, you still get the information presented to you later on. Then moving into July, we're going to be looking at finalizing this plan, conducting a final steering committee meeting to get their concurrence and approval, and then also taking it to our partners and getting their approval as well. And then looking at August, wrapping the plan up, bringing it back to this board for a public hearing. So this is our contact information. That's my name and address and phone number on the screen, as well as our project manager from our consultant, Stewart. And I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
This is for public information. Does the board have any questions at this time? If not, we appreciate and thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the tax collection?
So move.
So second?
Second it.
All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Thank you. Now to the banking. Who's next?
Brian Barnett.
Mr. Chairman and Board, we wanted to come back to you to let you know that we have sent out our banking RFP. It went out on Friday, June the 8th. We have extended the deadline until July 27th. We reached out to all the banks here in Pitt County. We made sure they had the information, and we hope to receive input here shortly.
And actually, the July 27th was the original deadline. We haven't extended it, but that's correct. The original deadline as published.
Any questions? If not, continue to do the good work and get us money cheap and small payments.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, what's the next, Mr. Mayor?
Monthly financial report, Brian Barnett.
I move for acceptance of the
Second.
financial report.
All right, all in favor indicate by raising your right hand. So ordered. Next.
Okay, next, I've got on the manager's report, next meeting dates. In the month of July, you will have one meeting on July the 9th at 9 a.m. That's due to the NACO conference that will be held later that month. And then in August, your first meeting will be first Monday, August 6th at 9 a.m. Item B is an update regarding the CSX Railroad, and the county attorney has 3 things to update the board on with that.
Yes, actually 4, if I may.
Okay.
Thank you. Last time we spoke about CSX was on August 23rd, and the board gave me 3 directives at the end of that meeting. One, Chairman Owens directed that I reach out to the U.S. Attorney's Office regarding possible criminal charges. The second thing was to continue pressure at the federal level, and Commissioner Huggins requested I reach out to Reginald Spate and Congressman Butterfield's office. And the third one was to begin a conversation at the local level to pursue a meeting with the local train master. So tonight is to give you a report back on those 3 items as the board had directed. But before I do that, I wanted to give you more recent news than that and let the board know that on June 6th, John Dillard, who's the vice president with CSX, who we've been working with all along, reached out to me and wanted to let me know at that time that CSX is actually soliciting bids to sell the Eastern North Carolina line. And it's the result of a new corporate initiative where they're looking at managing their assets in a manner that will create long-term value for the company. And as a result of that assessment, they are selling 6 rail segments. And one of those segments that CSX intends to sell is our line, the one that we've been talking about that's at issue. That bid request went public on the afternoon at 3 o'clock on June 6th. So I will monitor the progress on that sale and keep the board advised as to what may happen. But that is now public. That move may make the rest of, I'll just keep the follow-up on the other 3 fairly brief because that may make the remainder of it moot. And I'll start with the best news of the 3 first, is that James Rhodes and I met with John Dillard and the train master, George Stevenson, on May 16th. We had a really good meeting, I thought. James is still here if he wants to chime in. In my opinion, the train master, he was professional in our meeting. He was cooperative. He was very knowledgeable. He let us know that he oversees a seasoned, older, experienced crew of train members, and we learned a lot in that meeting. We learned one of the most significant things that we learned was that due to the prosperity of his clients that utilize that line, the trains over time have increased in length to over 100 cars going from Rocky Mount to Lee Creek. That being the case, the trains are too long to fit in the existing switching yard. And so they can't cross the street and go into the switching yard and not block the road. And that is why they're stopping between the homes. There are some shorter trains that can go in. There are also some local cars that remain housed at that, which takes away some of the available length in that switching yard. So as a result of that, these trains are having to stop between the homes in order to do crew shift changes, which can take realistically up to 1 to 2 hours for that shift change. It takes 3 crews of 2 people to serve that run from Rocky Mount to Lee Creek and then back again. And so some of the other things we learned, the crews are paid by the trip. They're not paid by the hour. They have no incentive to stay there a minute longer than they need to be. The pay scale and structure is just not designed that way. And so he assured us that whenever possible, that train would pull all the way into the yard. That's just what we had been asking for. That meeting was on May 16th. When we got Mr. Cradles, the resident who lives beside it, he sends us a calendar each month to let us know what the concerns are. On his May calendar, every day following from May 21st through May 27th, that train was short enough to pull all the way into the switching yard. And that was done by that train master. On the days where it was not, the time that that train stayed idling between the homes was exactly as had been projected, between about 1 hour and 2.5 hours at the longest, a little less than 2.5 hours. And so I'm hopeful that that good progress will continue, and I was pleased with the results of that meeting. The other 2 points, just briefly, I did speak with both Glenn Perry in our Pitt County DA's office, and he linked me to John Bennett in the U.S. Attorney's office about potential criminal charges. I think even with this good progress, we need to be knowledgeable about what all of our options are. And so I spent some time talking with them about harassment charges in particular at the criminal level. Because of the nature of harassment charges, I mean, we talked about all sorts of harassment. As a result, the bottom line there was that we can continue to have conversations as things change, but neither of the gentlemen, who I regard as very well versed in the criminal arena, they said we are not aware of a criminal path for this type of behavior, which had related to the excessive idling. They said that you really needed to be person-specific when it came to this type of charge, and it had to be outside the scope of their usual train operations. It had to rise to a level of something very malicious in that regard, and so there would need to be some additional data gathered if we were going to look to go down that path. They viewed it as more of a civil public nuisance and not a criminal matter, but I have now opened those lines of communication and have those avenues so that to the extent our facts change significantly or circumstances change, I feel like we have paths to the people who can make a difference at both the state and the federal level, because if it's an individual who is engaging in behavior, it might be a state action and not a federal action. So I spent some time talking to them. I feel good about the information I've gained, and I think we need to keep that in our back pocket as we move forward to determine if there's a point in time when that may be appropriate. The last thing was the email was to the federal pressure. I did, the next day after our meeting, send an email to Reginald Spade on April 25th. On May 30th, when we went to County Assembly Day, Ms. Huggins advised me that he hadn't received it, so I resent that email to him. I will continue to follow up with his office. We've also continued communication with William Moore in Congressman Jones's office. He followed up with us after our meeting with the train master. We will, despite this good progress, continue to apply the pressure at the federal level through both Congressman Butterfield's office, Walter Jones's office, and anyone else at the federal level who will listen to us. But at this point, we seem to have things somewhat at bay. That doesn't mean that every day is going to be perfect, and it doesn't mean the entire picture wouldn't change if they receive a bid and the line is sold. And so I can answer any questions you may have, and will continue to monitor it closely and let you know when I have additional or new information.
Sounds like you made a good progress, and I know the people out there that's been suffering from this have benefited from it greatly. I don't know of anything more malicious than keeping a man and his wife up all night sleeping, but that's another point. Any other comments?
I wanted to know, in the sale, is there any thing you can do to talk about so we won't start this whole trip all over again? Did he indicate anything like that?
He did not. He let me know that the line was for sale. He let me know that it was not a fire sale. They weren't looking to just let go of it cheap and unload it, but they were looking for some fair value, and I suppose the buyer can do with that line.
Any further questions? Not one that's
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, next we have an announcement regarding the Sheriff's Office. They've applied for some domestic violence training monies. They've been receiving these dollars for about 20 years, and it's a standard $25,000. And there's a match on that, but they use a portion of the salary within the Sheriff's Office for that. That grant was due June 12th, so they went ahead and applied for it, and I'm just announcing it.
Very good.
Item D, as the board will recall, I think back maybe in the wintertime, the board approved a ambulance remounting project for 5 different units within the county's fleet, and just reporting to you that we have received 3 of those 5 and have went through checklists on those units and have talked to the squads who will be receiving those units. They had some pretty extensive comments, but I believe we've worked through those, and at this point we are ready to deploy those units. We as staff are satisfied with the process that we went through, meeting the general statutes in the bidding for that, and just letting you know that we are deploying those, and those will be out. I think actually 3 of the 5. One is going to Fountain, one's going to Farmville, and the other's down to Grifton. And we'll be receiving the other 2 as they're remounted. Had 2 other items real quick. One was dealing with the Conversion Economic Development Study. Just to let you know that study continues. It's a joint study between Pitt County government, the City of Greenville Utilities, and the Committee 100. And the 4 individuals, being myself, Ann Wall, Tony Cannon, and Spence Cosby, are continuing to work on that, work with the consultant Convergent. As you recall, there were community input sessions earlier this year, back in April, and there will be some interviews to measure private sector funding in terms of investment for a public-private partnership that will be coming up. On your July 9th agenda, plan on coming back with an agenda item to talk more about the feasibility study that they would like to show the partners that they would like to actually be the private sector partners that will bring money to the table, and also we'll have a working draft of a future governance that will be proposed. We'll bring back details to you on that. And I think we will probably give some update to the Pitt County Development Commission in their meeting 4th Thursday of this month, I believe. It's later this month. And the last item is a good news item. We've got notification from the federal government that Pitt County has been awarded $1 million related to Hurricane Matthew for buyout or acquisition of property, and that should allow us to acquire or buy out and demolish 11 residential properties that are located in the floodplain. The state is currently writing this contract for the funding to be awarded to Pitt County, and affected property owners will be advised by the planning staff once the grant is awarded.
Thank you.
And that is all I have.
All right. Any motion for consent agenda?
Second it.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, just one item on consent. On the item number 10 on the procurement policy, There was a date on the front page that needs to be changed from July 1/17 to July 1/18, but otherwise the policy stands.
Without addition, all in favor of the motion indicate by raising your right hand. All opposed, so ordered. Okay, Dr. Marr.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
I hope you received in your packet a copy of this State of the County's Health Report from last year. I hope you'll take a look at that. It's got our 6 priorities for the county, including the 3 from the Board of Health and 3 from the Hospital Foundation, and also Pitt Partners for Health. And we want to, thanks to the PIO office for helping us get that hot off the press last week, and to the Vidant Health Foundation for all the things that you'll see in there that they do. I'm here to talk to you tonight about the Medicaid cost settlement. Actually, this is from 2013 that we are in a payback situation with the Division of Medical Assistance, or the Medicaid office for North Carolina. So I thought I'd take just a minute to sort of review how we got here where we are today. The amount is $407,000 that we owe back to the state, but that's not the whole story, so I'd like to tell you the whole story tonight. First of all, for our television audience, just to remind people, Medicaid is a joint federal and state insurance program that's administered by the state and provides for persons of all ages whose income and resources are insufficient to pay for health care. And our sister agency, Department of Social Services, of course, enrolls people into Medicaid. So it's a means-tested program, and not just anybody can get into Medicaid. And if you're an adult, it's pretty hard to get into Medicaid. You have to be a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident. It may include low-income adults, their children, and people with certain disabilities. And poverty alone does not necessarily qualify someone for Medicaid. Our Medicaid patient population at the health department is predominantly women and children. Our prenatal patients often qualify for Medicaid, and then the children who are born to those women qualify for Medicaid, usually through the first 3 to 5 years of their life. Our Medicaid revenues right now for the health department are around 12%, but the Medicaid cost settlement is something that's done just for health departments, and well, not just for health departments, but it is done for all health departments in North Carolina. And this is under the federal law. This is from the Federal Registry. That says health department services reimbursed under a fee schedule and furnished to Medicaid recipients will be cost settled annually to Medicaid allowable cost. So we've been doing this for a long time. We get settled every year. It usually takes a year, year and a half, even longer before we get the cost settlement for a particular year. In 2012, going back to 2012, the state made a change in the formula used for our cost settlement calculation for local health departments. It took until April the 25th of 2014 before they implemented that change and approved it. On April 4th, so a couple of weeks before that, of 2014, we received a check, Pitt County Health Department received a check from state Medicaid for our 2013 cost settlement for $711,271. When we saw that check, we thought, that's too much, because typically our cost settlement runs about $450,000 a year. This year, I think we have budgeted less than that because of some of the changes that have taken place. I think we've got about $260,000 budgeted this year for cost settlement. So we suspected this was too much, but we deposited the check. After that time, they said, indeed, we are going to owe them some money back, but they hadn't told us how much yet. 2 years ago, in the short session of the General Assembly, this was being discussed. The Health Directors Association went along with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, pleaded to the General Assembly to fill that gap for local health departments who were going to be in a payback situation, because this wasn't just Pitt County, it was all the way across the state. They were going to be in a payback situation for the 2013 settlement. As a result of that pleading, our General Assembly in the short session 2 years ago, October of 2016, we received a check from the state for $345,347 to cover that shortfall that we were going to expect as we paid Medicaid back. So in total, we had $1,056,618 here in Pitt County earning interest, waiting for Medicaid to tell us how much we owed them back. July of last year, they told us we owed them $451,738. We said, whoa, that sounds like too much. We negotiated with them. They allowed us to go in and scrub our data to look at those charges again. We saved, well, you see, we whittled that down. Basically, we even hired a consultant to come in and help us do it more. We whittled that down from $451,738 to $407,488, which is what we owe today. So again, we received over $1 million. We're paying back $407,488, so that will give us a cost settlement for 2013 of $649,130, which is still way above what we expect this year and what we got last year. So I know a lot of the public, when they saw this figure that the health department owes $407,000, it was kind of shocking, but you have to know the rest of the story for it to make sense. So I think we're coming out pretty good with a cost settlement of $649,000 for that year. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. I hope that makes sense.
Just an observation. No wonder we have such a deficit in government money, is it?
And remember, 66 cents of every one of those dollars is federal.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Yes,
Doc.
sir.
Any questions? Appreciate it.
Need board approval on the budget amendment?
Do we have a motion to approve this
I so
presentation?
move. Second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. So ordered.
Thank you very much.
Let me see that book, Doc, that you just had. I had mine today. I was going to give one to a friend because I thought it was such a nice publication.
Did y'all get?
Yeah, I think everybody probably got one. All right. Voting delegates.
Nominate Commissioner Floyd Huggins.
Second.
All right. All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Okay, next, social services.
James is taking care of us tonight. Okay. Okay, right now I'm here to talk to you about a contract.
I think you need.
I'm sorry, I got to get it down here. I'm here to talk to you about a contract between Pitt County Social Services and Interim Health Care. The contract is $300,649. It is to provide in-home services for our home and community care block grant patients. It is in our budget for this current year. We've had a contract with them for the last 3 years. This contract would be for 1 year with a renewal of 2 additional years if all goes well. There was a slight rate increase to $14 an hour. So we've been pleased with the work that they've done, the services they've provided. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions.
Any questions? No. Do we have a motion?
To accept the contract. Second.
All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Thank you. All right, James Rhodes.
One other item.
Oh, excuse me.
Item number-
Jan, I'm serious. Go ahead, honey.
I'll be happy to skip this one, but I think you need it. We have, as you see, a memorandum of understanding. Hopefully everybody has had the opportunity to take a look at the information in your packet. This is a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Health and Human Services in North Carolina and Pitt County. It is part of the Session Law 21741 that requires an annual written agreement for all programs excluding Medicaid. This was also known as Ryland's Law. There are many components to this particular law, and this is just one of those components. Other components include the social services study that they've contracted for to see how we are administering social services in North Carolina. This is the law that also talks about whether we're going to regionalize social services at a county level, also social services at a state level, and then there are a lot of different child welfare items in this law. So this was a pretty big change in the law for us. Again, this law does exclude Medicaid. Medicaid has their own law that has similar provisions. It does not have a memorandum of understanding, but it does have performance agreements. It does have takeover provisions, and it does have payback provisions for errors that are made. So these are two different processes here. We're only here to talk about the one that doesn't include Medicaid. And we've talked about this a little bit before, that it was coming. This requires all counties to meet performance measures. It requires counties and state to have certain administrative responsibilities. Examples of those administrative responsibilities are things like training, policy development and implementation, workforce development, so a variety of issues would be covered under the administrative responsibilities. And Mr. Elliott probably is going to jump in at any point where he chooses to on this.
Ms. Elliott, are you going to talk about the parts of the contract the state does not even have developed that we're being held accountable to? And okay. Yeah,
we're going to talk about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so DHHS has allowed a lot of comment. Two prior drafts of this memorandum were put out. The first one was sometime in April. We've had a second one. This is the third one. The County Commissioners Association, county managers, DSS directors all have provided significant feedback to this, and it has changed from a contract, kind of in your face, very punitive, to a memorandum of understanding that feels much more working together as a team, although there are some areas we still are concerned about. So a lot of the feedback that we had was incorporated into this final document. So one example of that feedback that was incorporated was the contract to an MOU move, acknowledgement that some of the measures that are in here that we're going to be held accountable for, we don't totally control. We have to deal with court partners. We deal with mental health systems. All those kinds of things can come into play as to whether we are able to do what we need to do with children and adults. So it's on our back from the measurement, but it's acknowledgement that we don't totally have that ability. So there's still a lot more information to come about the process. The first issue is to get these signed. The MOU specifics, it's an agreement between the Department of Health and Human Services and the County of Pitt. It is not an agreement between DHHS and Pitt County DSS. The law is specific around that. It is effective July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2019. There are a variety of performance remedies in this. The first remedy, of course, is corrective action, and we're all familiar with corrective action processes. We do a lot of those. The second remedy is the withholding of federal and state dollars if we fail to perform. The third remedy is takeover of specific programs where problems exist and are not being rectified. There's a lot of different distance between corrective action and taking over a program. It's not like 1, 2, 3. It's a very long, drawn-out process. The state has acknowledged that they will not initiate this till January 1 of 2019, the corrective action processes and the holding us accountable piece, in part because of what was just said. They don't even have some of these reports developed. Some of this data isn't out there yet in a way that it can be quantified and be reliable. So this is an opportunity for them and us to put this together, take a look at this, make sure that we have good data, make sure that we can all agree, and there's some other things we'll talk about in just a minute that it's going to allow us some time to do. The DHHS responsibilities in all of this are that they're to provide supervision, program monitoring, and technical assistance. They are to provide leadership and coordination for strategies addressing system-level barriers. So, for example, if one of the things we need is more court time and more support from the court system, then at the state level, they're going to work with the Administrative Office of the Courts to try and help get those kinds of things in place, because those are dollars that would have to be found to do that. And that's just one example. They are to work with us around staff training and workforce development. They are, of course, as part of their responsibility to do compliance monitoring. They are to develop the reports, and these need to be reliable data reports. We still have some problems with reliability of data in some of the systems we currently have, so that's why we were very strong about that. They are to provide timely communication regarding law, rule, or policy. And, you know, when the state is who drafted this, so everywhere they're held accountable for something, they say things like where feasible, timely when feasible. We don't get those opportunities. We are or we aren't. But I do understand sometimes policies from the feds come down at the last minute and they have to implement them quickly. So we are held accountable at that point. There's a piece in here about interagency cooperation, and locally that would be emergency management, and Red Cross would be an example. Our responsibilities are to make sure that our staff get the training they need, that we comply with law, rule, regulation, and policy, that we maintain and submit accurate data. As we all know, good data in gives you good data out, and if we mess up, then that's going to cause a problem. Timely communication with the department, especially if there are areas with potential negative impact. So if the county has a lawsuit coming because of something Pitt DSS did, then they want to know right away that that lawsuit's coming because they could easily be called in to be a party to that lawsuit. If there's a data breach or a HIPAA breach, they want to be made aware of those kinds of things, and those are just some examples. The county is to do interagency cooperation related to data, to disaster management, again, back to the Red Cross and emergency management. There is to be data security, and in fact, the state has started doing data audits, security audits, and one will be in Pitt County in the next week or so. So the performance measures. There are 27 performance measures. We started out with 70-some, so we have come a long way. 27 performance measures. These performance measures are in state and federal policy or law. Now, we found a couple of places that we don't think there's a performance measure that's in state or federal law, but we're now being held accountable for those. Child support is an example of where we've been held accountable for a long time with specific performance measures for a long term. And so they've worked a lot of those kinks and bugs out with child support because that's been something we've been doing for a long time. But child welfare is something that we may be seeing further modification to. The federal government came in and audited North Carolina for child welfare, which is part of why we're in this mess. And North Carolina did not pass, but I will say no other state passed either, this review by the federal government. And so what the federal government has done with the states is give them growth measures so that they can move towards the level that the federal government wants them at. And so we're saying, why can't we have growth measures? Why do we have to go from 70% to 90% in 1 month? So the state is looking at that kind of thing for us in child welfare. So there may be some changes to this. We certainly strive to meet all of our requirements. Again, they're going to validate the current reality and then develop those measures. So the 27 performance measures, they're tracked monthly and they're going to be reported monthly. Failure to meet a performance measure for 3 consecutive months, remember I've got 27 of them, could bring you into corrective action. Failure to comply with the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding could bring us into corrective action. There is an opportunity to dispute the need or the requirement to come into corrective action, and examples of that would be, suppose we had a hurricane. So you were tied up in a disaster. Well, you were busy focused on the disaster, so you couldn't meet your performance measures that month. If NC FAST was not performing correctly, and we could prove that that was the issue that caused us to not meet those measures, then that's another example of a performance measure that we could dispute. So there are ways to dispute the performance measures. We're currently estimating that we're probably meeting 60 to 70% of those performance measures now on a monthly basis. Varies by month. And I can give you an example, because again, child support, we've been doing child support measures for a long time, and Pitt County gets letters every month from our rep that says, you are exceeding the state average, okay? So we're in good shape in child support. Of the 5 measures that they are measuring, we are meeting 3 of those 5 today, but these measures are all annual performance measures, not monthly performance measures. So I don't know how they're going to make that work. In food stamps, we're meeting 3 out of 4 of those measures on a consistent monthly basis, but one of them can give us some trouble from time to time. Another example of where you might have trouble is if you have 4 cases that met this particular activity and you messed up one of them, then you've automatically missed, because you're at 75% instead of 100%, and we've got to be at 90%. So you can see where there's some areas that it would be difficult for us to consistently do this. So we're a little worried about those. So that's kind of what the performance measures look like, and you in your packet with the memorandum, you have those performance measures that are listed. How does corrective action work? The department and the county will work to develop an improvement plan. The copy of the plan will first be sent to the DSS board. Continued non-compliance will require a new plan not to exceed 12 months in length. That plan will then contain information about continuous review by all parties, including the DSS board. The county manager gets involved, the commission chair gets involved, and the DSS board chair will all be involved in this process when we get beyond that initial plan. So, if there's continued failure, we would then move to the area of withholding federal and or state dollars. Now, it's in the law, but there is acknowledgement at the state level that there is not real support for withholding federal or state dollars, because frequently it's a resource issue. So if you're withholding the money, how are you going to enhance the resources that you need? So, like I say, it's in the law. We'll see what happens. The secretary then can, if that doesn't work, then the secretary can then assume control of the service delivery area. And the county would be responsible for any costs that might be incurred to bring us up to standard. And of course, the goal is to move us into sustainable compliance. And right now, the state is in a county, because they've had this ability in both Medicaid and in child welfare for many, many years. And right now, they are in a county dealing with a child welfare issue. So it's taking a lot of manpower on their behalf to do what they need to do. So the areas of concern that we have, and I've mentioned a few of these, the state actually has no performance measures. They just have statements that, you know, they will supply policy, they will supply training. Another area of concern, of course, is that the county doesn't control all the needed resources. We've talked about that, mental health, courts. Other counties, we use other counties and other states to do a lot of what we need to do. If I've got a child placed in Guilford County, I'm going to rely on Guilford DSS to do the things that I need to have done. So if they miss the monthly visits, I'm going to be held accountable for that, because it's in my performance requirements. Some of the reports we've mentioned don't exist today and will still need to be developed. The low number in the denominator, as I mentioned, can result in just one case causing you to be out of compliance. And Pitt's a large county. Think about a county like Terrell or Hyde or some of those who don't have near the volume that we have. There are a lot of questions about the process itself and the triggers. And as of June 14th, there had only been 11 MOUs returned to the department. A lot of the counties are meeting just like we are this week and are hoping to get these MOUs dealt with this week and signed. So there's a lot going on, lots of concern. And I will stop now to ask if there are any questions before we move to what we want.
Question.
Or if any other comments from the manager or for Ms. Gallagher, since they were all involved.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Ms. Elliott, a year from now when we develop the fiscal year 1920 budget, what impact would you speculate this might have on your budget request a year from now?
Well,
Major,
you know, I asked for several positions this year to try and help prevent some potential issues. I think, I don't know. We're going to have to look and see what those resources are based on how our performance is and what the state ultimately comes back with. Clearly, we are understaffed in certain areas. We may need to do more contracting in certain areas, so there may be some areas of concern, but at this point, I would hesitate to say anything beyond that.
I'll make a motion if we're ready.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the county manager and DSS director to sign and return the MOU to the state.
Any discussion? Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
How many, approximately, how many people do you have employed just to do all this record keeping, all this performance measurement versus out meeting people and meeting people's needs?
You know, we really have very few staff that aren't involved in direct service anymore.
Well, that's great.
We have a couple of folks at the front desk in both buildings. We have 2 data management folks that have come on board in the last couple of years. We have a few clerks, and then what we have in our fiscal area, and that's it. The rest of it is staff doing the work and trying to keep up with it.
Well, I think that's great, because as I was listening to your presentation, I was seeing a lot of man hours, person hours, being spent on some of these performance measurements and keeping up with all the data.
Well, meeting the performance measurements is going to require a lot of man hours. Keeping up with it, we're hoping eventually the computers will help us do that. But yeah.
Thank you.
that's why her budget's so much larger than the county's, Jim.
Right, I know.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, James?
Yes, sir. We have another, that's right. Janice keeps popping up.
She's everywhere.
We have another street improvement project. This one's the multi-laning of Allen Road. As many of you know, is sorely needed. We've got some Board of Education projects going on out there, certainly with the bus garage. And with this, the city of Greenville has approached the Department of Transportation. The word betterments here basically is the sidewalk construction. So they've asked that sidewalks be constructed on both sides of this particular road segment. And again, Allen Road, this is the segment between Stantonsburg and Dickinson Avenue Extension. A lot of traffic through there. Of course, our transfer station's located there as well. Also, a lot of new residential development. So there is a need for sidewalks. With this particular agreement that's in your package tonight, this is a tri-party agreement. The county is in there by virtue of a portion or several portions of the area along Allen Road still being within unincorporated Pitt County. However, the city has agreed to fully fund the 40% required match to go along with the sidewalk construction, and just as importantly, all the maintenance to go along with that. So with that, we'll simply be signing it because some of the area is in our jurisdiction.
Good contract with no money requirement.
Exactly.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Tim, I believe you're next.
Yeah, good evening, Chairman, members of the board. This first item is our contract renewal for our HVAC maintenance and repair contract. As you know, for the last approximately 6 years, we've had Piedmont Service Group as our HVAC maintenance and repair contractor. The last time that this was renewed 3 years ago, there was not a increase to their fee, their yearly fee. This year we met with them and they are requesting a 5% CPI increase. We also went through the items that are included in the contract as far as the actual equipment. There is some additional equipment that is added due to the radio paging project. We have some HVAC units at some of those facilities, as well as some additions at the farmers market. So those are included, as well as the deletion of some equipment at 9th Street, which we will discuss here in a minute. The first year of the contract is for $260,788. The second is $264,295, and the third year will be the same with a total of $789,378. So,
What's the pleasure of the board?
Second it.
All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. All opposed, so ordered. Thank you.
Next item is the Sheriff's 9th Street office lease. This is the facility that the sheriff has their patrol division at, 213 West 9th Street. That building has actually changed hands. It was formerly owned by Don Edwards. It is now owned by Edwin Clark. We've talked with Mr. Clark. He is allowing the county to remain in that building until the end of January. So this lease will be extended until January 31st. However, we have been getting a very nice rate of $1,200 a month. Mr. Edwards, the current rate by Mr. Clark will be $2,500 a month. This is still probably a good deal based on the square footage that we are going to be occupying. So that is the lease that has been brought forward. There is a provision within the lease if the county finds a new location for those folks prior to January 31st, we can get out of the lease with a 30-day notification.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Now, do we have to get out by January the 31st?
Yes.
Correct. Yeah, so we got no option.
We hope to be out much sooner than that.
Yeah, well, I hope so too, so we can save that $2,500 a month.
All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, like. So ordered. Okay.
Quite a jump.
Good evening.
Good
evening.
Pitt County, we send our municipal solid waste to East Carolina Environmental Landfill, which is owned by Republic Services, and the current contract expired December 31st of 2017. The county sent a letter advising Republic Services of our intentions to renew the contract for additional 54 months. I wanted to get it to where we had the contract at our fiscal year versus January, so I could budget for it. The new rate, the term will be 54 months and will continue through June 30th, 2022. The new rate, which includes the mandatory $2 per ton tax that is sent to the state, will increase from $33.66 a ton to $34.50 a ton. This is the first price increase we've had from them since 2013, so they never went up during the 5 years prior. There are a couple of changes in the existing contract. The first change deals with fuel surcharge. If the price of fuel is between $2.75 a gallon and $3.75 a gallon, there will be no fuel surcharge, nor will there be any credit back to the county. Currently, in this last contract, we had a fuel surcharge based on $4.09, so the county has been receiving a credit every month for fuel, which has been good. If fuel goes below $2.75, the county will receive a credit. If fuel goes above $3.75, we will pay a fuel surcharge. Another change in the contract is there's a section that will penalize the contractor if at the end of the day we don't have trailers to put the trash in. We've had some issues back starting in January with having to keep people over because we didn't have the trailers to put the garbage in, and we are required to get all the garbage off the transfer station floor. So that was something that I pushed for, and we kept negotiating back, but I think we got a pretty good way to penalize them if this happens now. And with that, I'll answer any questions. If not, I'd like to get you to authorize the county manager to execute this contract.
Pleasure of the board.
So move.
All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. All opposed? Thank you. All right, next.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I appreciate you. The best is always last. So I'm feeling pretty good about this tonight. I'm here tonight to give you a review of the debris removal project status. First, on the screen, just to give you a little bit of background, it is 43 miles of stream, to those that have not seen the map. Basically starting at the Neuse River and working all the way up to Little Contentia, all the way to 258 in Farmville. That's the map on the left. The map on the right is the debris locations. Office staff have been out on the creek and done our assessment of debris that's in the creek restricting flow. These are just a couple pictures that we have of debris that's in the creek that's hindering flow. Just a couple more. Our bid opening or our bid proposals were due last Thursday, June 14th. After reviewing the bids, our staff recommendation to this board is to reject all bids due to the overall project budget and authorize staff to rebid the project.
What's the pleasure of the board?
So move.
All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, thank you.
Thank you very much.
How about the appointment to the Pitt Transit Board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Ms. Ward to the Pitt Area Transit Board.
Who?
Tanika Ward.
Thank you.
Not you.
All right, all in favor, raise your right
I know
hand.
there are a lot more Miss Wards
All
out there.
opposed, thank you. Greenville Utilities,
I recommend we nominate Parker Overton.
Second.
all in favor, raise your right hand.
One question, that is a renomination.
Right, right, correct. That's a reappointment, yes.
All got the count? Okay. Now, I believe there's been a request for a long, extensive closed session. So will you lead
I
us into
move we
that,
do not
Madam
do
Attorney?
that.
I will. It has been suggested that this board go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318.11A5, with regard to instructing the public body staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body negotiating the price or other material terms of the contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease, and also under 143, 318.11A1 to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to the law of this state or of the United States or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 130.
Have a motion to go into closed session. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, you have it. Thank you.
That's so Angie good told me to take my sweater off.
We've concluded our closed session now. We're back in open session. Is there anything else to come from the board? Mr. Webb?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve our June 4th closed session minutes as to the content.
Second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, so ordered. Commissioners' comments, we'll start down with Mr. McLaughlin.
No comment.
Tom?
None.
Beth?
No comment.
Glenn?
Real quick, just if the governor signs the 25-year retirement bill for law enforcement, I think that we should take a look at what that would mean for the county and how we could help that along. I think ultimately our expense would be flat on it, but it would give those officers a chance to retire 5 years earlier if they're willing to accept the terms, which is going to be about 30%. I'm not going to do it, but there's might be some people who would gain from doing it. Thank you.
Charles?
Jimmy?
Jimmy?
No comment.
Ann?
Move for adjournment.
All in favor, stand. Thank you, Mr. Elliott.